Redditors who suddenly came into a lot of money. What was your horror story of people begging for money? I once took second in a poker tournament and won 150k. There was an audience of about 200 people when it finished. Common practice was PPL ask winners for a lucky chip. I was almost mobbed by people begging for lucky chips as I left the casino. Had to be escorted by security and paid a friend $300 to follow me in their car, and we drove all over town for 2 hours to make sure nobody was following me home. So I wouldn't consider it a lot of money, but I won $5,000 on a scratch off that was given to me on my birthday by my aunt. It was just a $2 scratcher and obviously nobody thought I would win that much. I scratched it in front of everyone, and they were all super excited for me, except my aunt who demanded the ticket back because she paid for it. I even offered to split half with her. Long story short, she took me to small claims where the judge pretty much laughed, and she didn't get shit. Haven't talked to her since. I unexpectedly inherited about 4 years worth of take-home pay. Before I knew how much it would be, I told my best friend I'd be getting a few $1,000s. She immediately asked me to take her on a trip to Europe. That was the biggest thing she asked for, but she made other small requests as well. When the money came through, and it was a lot more than I'd anticipated, I did not tell my friend. Instead, I started distancing myself from her. I also did not tell any of my other friends. I did tell my boyfriend. He did not ask for anything. I took him on a trip to Europe. My grandma died a week before Christmas, and she left her house and 1/4 of her small fortune to me. The rest of the money went to my brother and my 2 cousins. My uncles and aunts have been a pain in my back ever since, claiming that the money/house Arthur's, etc. And I've also been approached by people who I haven't seen or talked in a while. Even my ex who dumped me for some douchebag rugby player started talking to me again and inviting me to places, and she's still dating the same guy. Anyway, I'm not naive enough to lend those people money or befriend even. Luckily I have good friends and my brother as advisors. My uncle's wife is bleeding him dry and everyone can tell he's just waiting for my grandmother to die so he can maybe come up for air for a month or 2 until his wife puts them in debt again. My aunt has never worked a day in her life and has been living on her husband's meager retirement and handouts from my grandmother for years. My mom on the other hand was smart with her retirement and hasn't taken money from her ever, as far as I know. We're encouraging my grandmother to spend all her money before she goes. Not that it wouldn't be nice to have a sudden windfall, but I'd much rather she really enjoy her last couple of years, since she has the money to make it happen. My money came in the form of accidental death inheritance after my dad died in a motorcycle crash. His girlfriend at the time was furious that he left everything to me. She tried to convince me to give her money, and when I refused she took everything, and I mean everything from his house overnight. She rented 2 U-Hauls and her brother raided the place. Furniture, household supplies, food, clothes, everything was gone. By the time I got there their only things left were a few t-shirts she left on the floor and a couple empty cans of soda on the kitchen counter. She even took things that held no monetary value, like a calendar I made my dad for Father's Day one year. It was just colorful cardboard and pictures of us I had glued together. She took it all. She started selling what she could on Facebook, mostly his woodworking tools and fishing gear, and she fled to somewhere in the next state over. We tried to get help from the police, but they didn't do much. She did a lot of other things that were bigger legal issues I guess. For instance, she ran a fake GoFundMe claiming the funds were going to his funeral and managed to get over 10 grand from his cowhawkers, but I'm the one who paid for the services. Last I heard they finally found her in some woodsy town, but I don't know what happened. It's honestly too emotional to deal with, and I've accepted the fact that she most likely destroyed or sold everything already anyway. It's been 2 years since this all happened. It's horribly sad, though. So a few years out of college my girlfriend and I were living in a sort of large communal apartment with 5 other people, 2 bedrooms, 2 couches in the common area. I had just gotten a significant promotion at my job, and that situation was exceptionally below my means, but my GF was convinced that these were her people and they were all going to become great philosophy writers and poets by living together and sharing experiences. They were all unemployed or underemployed and experienced moochers, so I was very careful not to let them know I was saving large sums of money with the intent of moving out soon and taking my GF with me or not. One day the other couple had an argument about rent, and to try and keep them from coming to blows, my GF promised them that I'd cover it for them and showed them one of my pay stubs, which I guess they showed everyone else. I got home from work and walked right into an apartment meeting ambush where everyone else informed me that they wanted me to contribute more meaningfully and they'd put it to a vote before I got back. I told them that I was already paying for their food, that they kept guilting my GF into buying for them, topping up the apartment emergency fund instead of stealing from it like the rest of them, and many other things, and that I wasn't going to cover other people's rent as well. The next day, when I was at work, someone went into my room and destroyed my laptop, which was the only thing of value I owned at the time. I collected the few things I wanted to take, told my GF I was breaking up with her, and walked out. All throughout school I was a bit of a loser, didn't do well in class, and never really cared. I used to go out all the time with my friends, and would hang out with them all the time. After school I didn't do much other than waste time, until I found my wife, and wanted to start being better for her. I did a 1-year software development course, and then got a pretty shitty job making almost nothing in my country, South Africa. When my wife got pregnant, all my friends basically ghosted me as I wasn't going to be going out partying with them anymore. They wouldn't return my texts or even answer my calls. A few years down the line I landed a very high paying remote job, $200k plus, for a SF based company. The average salary for a software developer in South Africa is around $30k per year. My wife was very proud of me, I think, and posted a picture of me on her Facebook standing next to my new car that I had just bought. Not 20 minutes after she posted it, I started getting messages from some of my old friends saying that it had been a while and they wanted to catch up and really missed me. There was one guy I always had a soft spot for and decided that I would go have dinner with him and see how the last 4 years of his life treated him. We hadn't even ordered our food, yet when he dropped the bomb on me that he felt that I owed him a lot of money for always being there for me, and that I would be selfish to not give him some money as I had so much, I quietly just got up and left. I eventually changed my number and deactivated my social media accounts, but people still harass my wife and mother to try and get some money out of me. This doesn't even go into the absolute shit I had coming from my dad's side of the family, who are basically hillbillies. I have 2 stories about them that I will share. One was a bit funny to me, and the other not so much. Story 1. So my uncle, let's call him Pios, he was always a very jealous and vindictive person, not to mention a raging wife-beating cheating alcoholic. When Pios learned from my mother about my situation, he called me up the one day and after a few minutes of being all nice asked me if I can help him pay for his medical bills because he is very sick and can't afford medical aid. I was reluctant, but thought maybe I can trust him. I told him that he would need to have the doctors email me invoices and I would pay them directly. He agreed and put down the phone. A few days later I got an invoice from a doctor for close $100k, which would be around $7,000. I noticed something was off as the banking details were not in the name of a practice, but rather a personal name. I called the doctor on the number on the invoice, and they told me that the banking details were incorrect, and that they are a GP who would never charge that much for anything. So what had turned out to happen was that Pios got his son to edit an invoice they had gotten from a doctor to change the amount and the banking details to try and trick me into paying a huge sum of money into their bank accounts. This was in November 0f 2019, all while my grandmother, Pios' mother, was in hospital on her deathbed. Story 2. My aunt, who is a massive piece of shit and a total idiot, heard I had some money and decided that it would be a good idea to take out a life insurance policy out on me in case something happened, and made herself the beneficiary. One strange thing is that she was paying the premium, so it was actually costing her money to do this. Another is that it turns out she thought that it would pay out my actual money. Not exactly horror story, but I've always made more money than most of my friends. Some of them would hit me up for cash, but usually I only agreed to small amounts or said no. I did however have a very close friend who I really enjoyed the time we spent, but we liked to drink, so bars were our go-to hangout. I usually ended up paying for the entire night, to the point where he said he wasn't comfortable hanging out because he never had the money. But I genuinely did like just hanging, and he always bought the first round. That's respect. Got a 7k settlement from a car accident. I accidentally left the check on the corner table in the living room. My dad walks into my bedroom and asks if I can lend my mom any money. I work minimum wage retail and ask him how much does she need. He says how about half of that 7k check. It has been almost 8 years. I haven't seen any of that money back. Before the recession hit, my dad had a pretty lucrative small business and we lived comfortable middle class lives. He would often lend his family money, since most of his sisters didn't amount to much in their lives. They would never pay him back, and often hassle him to give them money, since he was so well off. After the recession hit, we took a big dive and still were able to live okay, but had to sell a lot, no more insurance, and basically lived paycheck to paycheck, while my dad worked 7 days a week to make ends meet. After all he's done over the years, not one of them would help when we needed it. One of my uncles has even been even more well off with a car dealership and refused to aid my father with a loan, even though my father always pays his debts regardless of if others do the same. None of his sisters have ever repaid a cent of his generosity. I have a lot of terrible stories about them through the years, and finally he's cut them all out of his life after almost losing my mom through divorce last year, partly BC of his horrid family and how they treated her, and nearly drinking himself to death the past 3 years. They are truly terrible greedy people, and it's all taught me a lot about the kind of person I want to be and who I want to surround myself with. A guy I grew up with came into a lot of money after his grandfather died. His father and aunt got more, and it filtered down through to the grandkids. I'd moved away so hadn't seen or spoke to him much, but caught up when visiting my parents. All his friends started inviting him out for drinks, which he'd pay for his own meals, again paid for his own, like he would normally do. Wouldn't splash the cash, and invested a good chunk of it. When we caught up I asked him how things were, and he told me about all of that, which I hadn't known, so I made a remark of how well did the investments go. Why? How much are you after? I'm not, just asking. He was so used to people being interested in how much money he had, it had become normal. He was unfriended by so many people because he wouldn't blow all his money on superficial things. The investments had done really well, and he had a fair amount of money in the bank and still invested, so I congratulated him on savvy financial planning, but wasn't interested in his money, which was refreshing for him. His brother and cousins had wasted all their inheritance, his uncle and aunt too, but as his parents ran their own business, I suppose the fact they had invested their cut was normal thinking for him. I asked how bad did the begging get? His brother tried to access his online banking to transfer money to his account. Parents were not impressed. His cousins sent him and his parents fictional bills for expenses relating to the funeral 4 years after the burial. It was shocking the lengths these people went to because they had squandered their money and wanted more. I wished him all the best for the future, and we've chatted a bit on social media, and the begging/conning is still going on 10 years later. His brother is now heavily in debt, but no one will bail him out, which he thinks is unfair. Not technically begging, but still a horror story in my opinion. When I was around the age of 5, I had a job. Of course, my mom helped out tremendously and got me involved in this career platform, but it took a lot of time and effort on both of our parts, so we quite the profit from it. All the money was deposited under my name though, so I could use it once I turned 18. Didn't know this until I actually turned 18, but a trusted family member who knew my account information went into my account and took a good portion of money. It was pretty fucked up realizing that someone who had already done some pretty fucked up shit to me during my life also felt comfortable enough basically stealing money from a child. Still upsets me to this day because I wish that money cold gone to my mom. She deserved it more than anyone. Edit. For those wondering what job I had at age 5, I was in the acting and modeling industry. I'm a fairly average guy in my mid-20s who always wears the same $2 shirt and $5 jeans, but over the years it started to leak out that I had some money after a combination of me buying a business in my very small hometown, a gossipy girl from school who saw me on Seeking Arrangement, and enough social media posts showing me constantly traveling in business class or whatever, and the fact I seemed to do very little actual work. Then in the last year or so I've discovered a seemingly entire new branch of my family tree and a whole bunch of people from high school I don't remember ever saying more than a few words to suddenly claiming me as their childhood best friends. I caught up with an old actual schoolmate who knew me well enough and were having coffee, and she asks, "Is it true you bought a plane?" And a few things like that were absolutely insane. The Chinese whispers in my town had apparently gone absolutely crazy, and I'm always uncomfortable running into someone when I'm back there because everyone thinks I'm some crazy playboy millionaire when I spend most of my time in a blanket fort on the internet like everybody else. The extended family are the worst though, because they harass my mum, dad and grandmother who know nothing about my financial situation to borrow money. Many of these people I've never met in my life. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.